Travel is an essential part of any bucket list. Travel fills our senses with new sights, new sounds, new smells. It invigorates us with energy, doing something outside of our normal routine. I can't think of any other activity that really makes you feel alive and to learn so much. Bucket list travel usually includes long haul travel. When I mean long haul, I mean more than 4 hours, usually crossing oceans. And for some of us, this may be the first time we've ever done it in our life, and not quite sure what would that be like for a grand adventure such as crossing the ocean and going to Paris or Australia. I've put together a series of videos on helpful hints and to give you some idea of what sort of things you need to think about before you undertake some long haul travel. And so I've done these in 3 phases. I've done the preparation for travel, which is including organizing your documents and packing your bags. Then in phase 2, you'll accompany on my trip across from Australia to the US and some of the things I encountered on the way and some little helpful hints there. And then in phase 3 is the recovery after the flight, some little helpful hints there to deal with jet lag and some issues like that. So for the first stage, in preparing for these long haul trips, I've made it into 2 parts. And the first part is organizing documents, and the second part will be packing your bag, some things to consider when you're packing your bags. So let's look at part 1 of preparation, organizing your documents. Let's get that right now. So part of the process before I travel is to make sure I make photocopies and scan all my travel documents because they can get lost along the way. I'll have the originals in my computer bag, which is part of my carry-on, and then I'll have copies that'll be in my luggage. I'll also scan all the documents so I have access through email to get them. But sometimes you don't always have an internet connection or it's not convenient. So I kind of like old school. I like to have a hard copy for my itinerary, my passports, my travel documents, vouchers, things like that. So we'll start, first thing you can do is, I have dual citizenship, so I have an American passport and an Australian passport, and I'm required to travel with both. I need to enter the US on my US passport, and I need to enter Australia with my Australian passport. While I'm overseas, I travel on one or the other. I make that call depending on what part of the world I'm going to. There's some place that are more friendly to Australians than Americans, but if I'm going into some country that's a bit dicey, I always go on my American. So if there's any trouble that happens, I think we're far more likely America's going to come rescue me than Australia. So, but I have to travel with both documents, and even when I'm traveling overseas, I have to show both passports, and they know I have 2 passports. I can't say I just have one. Every country in the world, Big Brother's got us logged in. They know that I have 2 passports, and I have to provide them both, and they both have to be current with at least 6 months left. I had trouble one time renewing my Australian passport, which was a bit low. I had it renewed, but the actual document didn't come in. I had a piece of paper from the consulates, and it caused me some grief, but it didn't stop me from traveling. My American was fully up to date. But I look at these, my Australian one's good till 2025, and my American one is good till 2028. So we're in good shape on those. One of the primary reasons I got my Australian passport was I used to have a visa to go in and out of the country, and I got caught up a few times on that where my visa to come back in the country had expired. It let me leave the country, but it was very difficult trying to get back in. So I have dual nationalities. So that is that. So I'll photocopy both of these, and then I'll scan the finished documents. Also, other documents that I bring along with me is my bank card for my American bank account. If you travel to a particular country quite often, it's well worth trying to open a bank account in that country and have a bit of money in that account so you can deal in that currency when you're visiting that country. this keeps you from getting caught up in an exchange rate. I took a world trip with my whole family in '98, I think it was. And when we left, the Australian dollar was pretty good. It was about 70 cents, which is normal for the exchange rate. And we took off on the trip, but I really wasn't using the internet back then. So while we were away, the exchange rate dropped down to 50. And we thought, oh, we're getting great deals. You know, this is really good value, particularly in the States. But towards the end of the trip, our card started getting rejected. We didn't have any money in there. And I didn't find out really till I got back that we went over our limits on everything because the exchange rate, I didn't factor in a 25% difference exchange rate. Lucky for us, back then I used to travel with a set amount of traveler's checks. Probably still not a bad idea. I don't bother with that anymore because I usually carry an American credit card and an Australian one. And I cash. I always recommend traveling with some cash. If I'm traveling in foreign countries other than Australia, I tend to want to keep American dollars as well as whatever the local currency is. Again, you'll find out your ATM machines won't work or they'll be down depending where you're at. Even in the States, I found where my Australian bank card won't work, and some they do. You find out which ones they do. I found out First Interstate works very well with my Commonwealth Bank here in Australia, and so that's where my account is in the States, and that just makes everything a bit better. But I look at the expiry date, and this card expired 2 months ago. That concerned me when I just noticed that just now. So I text my brother-in-law. He runs my finances and my businesses in the States, and my replacement card is with him. So as soon as I land over there, I'll activate that card and we'll be good to go. The last time it expired, the bank was great. It kept chasing. I was traveling around and kept sending it from branch to branch, but I kept missing it. So that should be all fine. Montana driver's license. I can drive with my Australian driver's license in any country really. But again, when I'm in America, I drive on my Montana driver's license. And when I'm in Australia, I drive on my Australian. If I'm traveling in other countries, I tend to use my Australian driver's license. Again, it goes with the kind of left side and right side of the road. If I'm in a country where they drive on the left, I use that driver's license. On the right, I use that driver's license. Probably makes no difference, but it's just what I do. And whenever I go to the States, I travel with my Costco card. Love Costco. We're supposed to have them here in Australia soon. I'm looking forward to that. So, we've photocopied both my passports. And now I'll photocopy my bank card. Even though it's expired, it's got a number on there that will come in handy. And what the heck, we'll put my Costco card on there as well. Actually, I'll turn it around so I got my membership number on it. There we go. So the other documents, you want to make sure your voucher number. So here's I'll use my own car while I'm in Montana. But when I travel down to Florida, I have a rent-a-car. So I got my voucher for the rent-a-car. Everything's online. It's usually never a problem. But I have, again, at some stage, I've had some issues with not being on file. I've had to produce something which is in the system. Rarely ever happens, but again, old school, like to have a hard copy of that. My travel itinerary, at least for the first half, getting me to the States. Hard copy again. I'll scan all this as well as I've got the original emails that this was sent to me. But again, old school, like to have that photocopied. And once I have all of these photocopied, then I'll run them through all in a scan, and then I'll email them to myself. And that's a very convenient way to have all your travel documents with you. Particular passports. If you're in a foreign country and you lose your passport, your bag gets stolen or lost or whatever, always travel with your passport on your person, or at least a bag clutched with you. I don't leave them in hotel safes unless I'm staying in quite a upmarket hotel. because you lose your travel documents. It's a major hassle. So make sure you have your travel documents with you and be very mindful of what you do with them. Same thing with your credit cards. Credit cards, I find better than debit cards. The banks usually cover it if you get fraud, if you go to a restaurant and they skim it off and all of a sudden you get all kinds of costs against it. You contact the credit card company and they'll null and void that. Again, keeping those sort of contact details of who your credit card companies, what numbers to call, all that you can find online, but it's nice to have that. I usually keep that in my phone. Traveling with your phone, I take my personal phone with me. You can do roaming. Roaming, sometimes it glitches and you don't get a good connection, or it's very expensive if you do it wrong, particularly in Montana, up in northern Montana, right on the Canadian border. It wants to roam into Canada all the time. So what I find works best and cheapest and easiest all around is I get a SIM card there, and I take my Australian SIM card out, put the American one in, and I use that while in America. It does give me a different phone number. You can forward your calls to the other one. I find that the most effective way. Some phones, if you travel a lot, you might want to look at some phones actually have dual SIMs, which is very handy. I've never had one myself, but I find that. You can carry two phones. I did that for a number of years. Well, while I was there, I go to Walmart, whatever, and I get one of those $10 track phones with a plan, and I have two phones. I keep my Australian phone with me, and I turn it on and off whenever I'm within Wi-Fi. And I'll still do that. I'll check it onto Wi-Fi to access any messages and things like that I might have. So that's the phone. So now I'm just going to scan all this and email it to me. And those are some of the helpful little hints I do in preparing for my big trips. So let's go down and see what I pack. Well, I hope you found that helpful. And if you did, give me a thumbs up. And remember, you can follow me on my Facebook page, Your Journey Transitions, on my Twitter, on my Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also keep an eye on my website, yourjourneytransitions.com. I'll post some helpful documents and checklists and things along the way. I'm not quite sure when I'll get around to putting those up, but keep an eye on that website under documents, and there might be some helpful things there for you as well. Most importantly, remember to share my channel and these videos to anyone you know over 50, anyone that you would wish to have peace of mind in their retirement years. Until then, this is Rick Ward, your guide to the retirement stages, wishing you an extraordinary retirement.
This is like a cocoon.
What comes out of a cocoon?
Butterflies.
Are butterflies beautiful?
Yeah.